Cheryl. Can't anyone else enjoy things?
1, 2, 3, 4. If you can do all your stuff, what can figure it out? That's how it chooses you.
I'm Teresa Sparks.
I'm Claire Patton. And this is It Chooses You.
Shit. That's right. What
you can
she
say
said.
it too.
I stepped all over you, though.
Well, we're on two separate tracks, so who cares?
Sweet.
I just mute your ass.
Good. That's how it should be. And Teresa just didn't have anything to say starting here. It is springtime, and Claire and I had tickets to a baseball game.
Yep.
That was supposed to happen this coming weekend.
Yep.
And that's not happening. Spoiler alert. Baseball hasn't started yet. And so because the game was supposed to be this week, and I was like, we were going to have this party, and I'm going to tell Claire about baseball, and then we're going to watch a game, and then she's going to tell me her experience of baseball. And it was maybe the most planned thing we had on this podcast, and then it went away. Like everything goes away. But last week I kind of said I really want to talk about baseball because like the air smells like baseball season, and the amount of moisture in the air, and the sunlight angles in the morning, and you know it's baseball time of year has started. So some farmers do it by how much snow is in the north field. I do it by whether it's baseball season or not. So I wanted to tell you about why I like baseball, and my hope is that you will still like me at the end of the conversation. That's my end game. Claire and I are still friends at the end.
Well, I just briefly want to summarize that this idea of talking about baseball and going to this baseball game brought up some stuff for me around my friendship with you. Because somewhere I have the flawed belief that if you're truly connected with someone and you have a deep friendship, that you should like all of the same things. Which is partly why this podcast is interesting to me, because it proves me wrong daily. And so we had a discussion about this, but the idea of going to a baseball game with you had texted me, apart from the podcast, just that you wanted me to go. And I said that I was afraid I'd be bored. And your response was, oh yeah, you'll be bored. But we're going to drink beer. We're going to be sitting with a vista of the Rocky Mountains. It's going to be hot and sunny, and we're going to eat hot dogs, and it's going to be great. So I trust you. And I was actually excited to have that experience with you, and also to hear about baseball. As you said, that's not happening in quite the way we thought, but we are still participating in baseball in this way.
That's right.
All things virtual.
That's right. This is our offering. When you were like, will I be bored? And I was like, yeah, definitely. No question. And I think the thing that I said to you was people who like baseball are bored at baseball games. That's just part of it. It's just part of it. It's not a action-packed, it's not a Michael Bay film, okay? It's not like climax. It's not that.
It's more like a Howard's End.
Sorry, I just got a flash of Emma Thompson's hair in that film. Oh, I need a big Edwardian puff. I wonder if I can pull my stuff up.
I mean, what else are you going to be doing with your time right now?
Not being allowed to inherit cottages, apparently. Like, my position about baseball is that, and this goes back to our conversation, I don't think people that I love have to like the same things I like. And I feel like partially that's because I've always been mostly an alien. And no one has ever liked the things I like. And so I don't require that. That's not a thing on my list for friendship anymore because, I mean, if you've got one that's clearly a deal breaker for almost everyone you meet, then I would just never talk to anybody. But I was really charmed by that when you said it, because it helped me understand sort of why we resonate so well about the things we both like and about why we don't really talk about the things that one of us likes and the other doesn't. I mean, it just helped me understand maybe a little bit of what was going on for you with that.
Well, the really interesting thing that happened is when you texted me asking me to go to the game, I kind of freaked out. But I had the presence of mind to go, why am I freaking out? And the answer was because I'm afraid I'll be bored. And then you said you will. And so I felt accepted.
Oh.
Because the pressure to me, the imagined pressure was, well, then she's going to enjoy baseball as much as I do, that this was your position.
Right.
And we'll be even closer because we'll start going to all these baseball games together. There was a whole scenario playing out in my head.
You had a big story.
Oh, yeah. And you completely 100% accepted my potential boredom as a good friend.
Yeah. I love the image that maybe you had of me like, I'm at the game with you, but I'm not looking at the game. I'm looking at you. Right. What's Claire think? How's Claire reacting? And every time something happens, whipping my head to you and making sure you're reacting the right way.
Yeah, basically, I was afraid you were going to be the worst part of me. A-hole.
That's amazing.
I do have a question for you about baseball, which is, what are your, and maybe you were going to go into this anyway, but what are your early experiences with baseball?
So this is turning into Teresa's parents' phase of the podcast because my dad introduced me. He loves geology and he introduced me to geology, and he loves baseball and he introduced me to baseball. I have a story that my parents probably don't agree with, that really they wanted a son, like more than anything. And my name was Joshua until I was born. So
I never knew that.
Yeah. And I was like, Joshua's a great name. Why did you give me Joshua? And then you just saddled me with all the female family names. I could have had a cool female name. You knew how to name babies. Joshua's a good name. There's a lot going on in my family. There's a lot going on. But I love baseball because my dad loves baseball and he wanted a son. And so he made sure that I fucking love baseball. And he succeeded. Like, you know, he wanted me to do a lot of things in the world, but the thing that was most important to him earliest was baseball, and he got me. So good job.
What were his methods of...
Well, he played catch with me from a very young age. He bought, of course, all the equipment because no 5-year-old is out there saying, I want a ball glove, unless they have that experience, right?
Did he play catch with your sister at all?
Oh, yeah. My sister played too.
Okay.
He signed me up for Little League with the boys because, West Virginia, there's no girls team, when I was 7 years old. So I played right field like you do when you're bad and young, because no one hits it out there. Played right field for a couple years and then developed some athletic ability and learned the rules of the game, which took some time. And then I started playing infield. So I played on rec leagues, community and summer rec leagues. I may have only played with the boys for 1 year before, and I played baseball. But then my dad, I guess, found a softball league one town over for girls. And then I started playing softball. And then I continued playing softball. And my sister played too. And for a short period of time, before I became a teenager and started hating everything having to do with my parents just 'cause. So before that and after my sister had gotten sort of old enough and physically like me enough to be on the same teams and to be partners, she played third base and I played shortstop for like 4 years. And it was super fun. I really miss playing ball with her. So yeah, all of that family stuff is definitely a part of my experience of the game, for sure. So it's really an easy game for kids to learn. Not because the rules are easy, because they're incredibly convoluted and annoying, but you don't have to know everything to play. The umpires are there for you. You've got people who have the rule book in their mind on the field with you. And so if you know generally what direction you're supposed to run, and generally where you throw a ball when you have it, the umpires are handling all the other stuff. So you don't actually have to learn the rules to play the game. I want to do a little intro to the main body of the tale I'm telling today. And I want to say that there are exceptions to every single thing I'm about to say. Because in no way am I providing a complete explanation and examination of the rules of baseball. If someone would like to write one, a guide to the rules of baseball that a normal, intelligent adult can grasp in about 15 minutes, please do that, because I would have much rather found one and used it than writing this, because mine is incomplete and incorrect. So, I also want to say I'm very specifically and intentionally going to use male pronouns throughout. Women are technically allowed to play AAA ball, A-level ball, and Major League Baseball. Technically allowed, since a completely discriminatory ruling from 1952 was struck down in 1992. Women are now allowed, except they're not really, because all the people in charge of scouting, which is how you become an A-level ball player or an MLB ball player, Those people are all old white people. Not all of them, obviously, are white. But most of them are old. And they're all dudes. And none of them want to go to a girls' softball game and see if that one catcher might make it somewhere, in a higher form of baseball. Like, they don't want to do it. It's too much for them. I have lots of feelings about that. I don't know if you can tell. There's no rational reason why women shouldn't play baseball, except that, there are lots of men living in a spreading stain of their own fear and feelings of inadequacy. And if a woman strikes out a man, that'd just be the end of them. So, yeah, there are like 6,500 men playing in the majors and in A-level ball right now, and no women. Because as I've told you before, if being a Major League ball player had been a potential career path, I may have explored. So when I say I could have been I'm not saying I could have played Major League ball.
But you would have wanted to.
Yeah, it was a dream of mine until I realized I wasn't allowed to have it. And now here I am. So.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah,
man.
I know, right? Well, and, think about that's true for a lot of people in a lot of ways. That was a dream of mine until I realized there's no way they're going to let me do it. That's it, Baseball is at the core of my personality, Claire.
Wow.
Welcome in.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Baseball was not invented. That's another thing. We're going to talk about the history of baseball a little bit. Baseball was not invented. There are lots of stories about how somebody on a hot summer day decided he was going to throw a thing at another thing, and that became the sport of lacrosse or whatever. Baseball's not like that. Baseball is like a folk tale. It sort of had lots of different kinds of ways you played it, depending on whether you were in Massachusetts or Philadelphia or New York. And people have been playing it in this country since the 1700s. And so, like you say, oh, what kind of, like, how did baseball come about? It was just a bunch of kids who are like, well, here's a rock, here's a stick. We got ourselves a game, buddy. It took a while for one version to be decided upon. So in the early period of playing, there's this is hysterical. The Massachusetts version of baseball actually had fewer rules than the New York version, and the New York version is pretty much what turned into the modern game. But the Massachusetts game, you didn't have to stay in the base path. I'll tell you what that means later. In the Massachusetts game, you didn't have to stay on the base path. You could just run out in the outfield and have people chasing you, trying to tag you down if you wanted. And I was like, well, that sounds like a whole lot of fun. Why don't we play it that way anymore? That sounds amazing.
It's like baseball plus tag.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Whereas the New York version says no. At all times, the base runner must maintain a line between himself and the base to which he's advancing, blah, 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 blah. The reason I like that origin story so much is because it does have a lot in common with folk stories. People tell stories about Johnny Appleseed in New York, and people tell stories about Johnny Appleseed in Pennsylvania. And they're really flavored by things that happen near where the person's telling the story, which I think is super beautiful. For the most part, it started as a rural game, obviously, because if you've seen a ballpark, you know how much space you need, right? And you're not going to find that in the crowded urban areas of the 1800s United States. So it started on farms and moved to cities. It was played in cities as early as 1805, though. Mm-hmm. So it did, it grew up and was played in cities very, very early in our history. Like, we were basically a country for 30 years, and they were only playing baseball in some cities, which I think is also super cool. It became a game for adults rather than just a game for kids about 3 minutes after the first dude realized you could bet on the game during the game because it was so long, and so bookies and gamblers could make money at every single inning, right? And they're like, oh, well, clearly this is a game for adults. We got to start paying people to do this because we're going to make so much money on the people who gamble on the games. And it was a really short step from there to just basically paying players to lose if you wanted to, which is famously what happened with the Chicago Black Sox in 1919. Do you know that story?
No.
See, I just don't even know where to start.
I've never heard of the Black Sox.
You've never heard of the Chicago Black Sox. Well, you know the Chicago team. There are two Chicago teams.
Right.
There's Chicago Cubs and the Chicago White Sox. Well, in 1919, the Chicago White Sox, 8 of the team members, the starting players, all were convicted of intentionally throwing the game so that they would win money. It wasn't a part of my story. I was more concerned about Rickey Henderson, so I'm not fully prepared. But they won the World Series, but then the title was taken away. And it was a huge stain on the, whatever, even though cheating has always been a part of baseball. And as we know from the Houston Astros scandal very recently, still a part of baseball. And this is the part of the interview where Claire is shrugging and smiling at me. And I know I'm only talking to anyone who listens to this who also likes baseball. Another important thing for you to visualize when you think about old-timey people playing baseball is that they used to go out with no gloves. They would just have their hands, and they would catch barehanded and throw barehanded, which, yes, you're shaking your head. That seems insane, right? That seems like a really short way to break a finger.
Right.
And it probably was. I don't have disease or broken finger stats for early baseball, but imagine a bunch of people in wool, baggy clothing with little ribbons pinned to their shirts with no equipment out in the field. That's baseball. People standing in a field at a distance from each other, all facing the same direction, looking at the same thing, waiting. In any baseball game, people standing in a field waiting is the thing that is most likely to be happening at any moment. And then if you come back at a remove, people sitting on the edge of a field, watching people standing in a field, waiting. And the sitting people are waiting for the standing people, and the standing people are waiting for the thing they're watching. And then take it back another remove, and you have people on television sitting, watching a field, of people sitting by a field, watching people standing in a field, waiting for something to happen. I mean, baseball is standing and waiting in a field, and it's the best thing that ever happened. And what are they waiting for? What are they looking at? Because they're all facing the same direction, right? And what direction is that? Well, it's the direction of the strike zone. They're looking for the moment when a ball thrown by a pitcher crosses through a space about the size of a fat golden retriever, and a bat meets it coming the other direction. Like, that's the center of the world for most of the ball game. What happens in the strike zone determines more than half the game. It's a tiny area. A baseball field is called a diamond, Claire. Do you know that?
Yes.
Okay. Why is it called a diamond?
Isn't it the shape of a diamond?
Correct. Good job. So there's a big green part, and inside that diamond there's a little smaller dirt diamond.
Right.
Nobody calls it that. They call it the infield. So the dirt diamond is the infield.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard the term.
The dirt diamond is the infield. The green part is the outfield. People who are in charge of defending are called fielders because they're standing in a field. People who are trying to score runs, which is how you win the game, are called batters. And they're standing in the batter's box. The thing that batters stand next to, and the thing that pitchers are trying to throw a ball over, that's called home plate.
Right.
Yeah. It's called plate, not base. For the first 2 years I played, I called it home base, because I was used to playing tag. So it's home plate. And the job of the batter is to get on base.
Right.
There are lots of ways they can do that. But the job of the batter is to get on base. The job of the fielders is to stop that from happening as soon as possible. The bases are 90 feet apart, arranged in a little diamond shape. The pitcher stands on a little hill in the middle of the small diamond. It's called the pitcher's mound, or just the mound. And yeah, the job is just to run those things as fast as humanly possible and touch home plate again. And yay, that means you scored a run.
You talked about how cheating was always a part of baseball, and I was just thinking about stealing bases. And I'm like, wow, cheating is basically built into the game. That's pretty fucking cool.
Oh, yeah. So that's actually a perfect segue. Because another part of the ball field is the dugout. So there are 2 dugouts on every field. There's one along the first baseline, which is between home plate and first base. That's called the first baseline. There's one dugout there, and there's one dugout on the third baseline. And that's where the teams sit and hang out during the game. So shenanigans in the dugout are very much a part of this game. So not only is cheating a part of it and stealing is actually built into it, there's some common dugout hijinks. One is really innocuous. You just blow a bubble with bubble gum and then stick it to somebody's hat.
Right.
And then wait until they notice. Okay? It's an easy one.
Yeah.
No harm, no foul. There might be some spit on your head, no problem. The best one, though, is a little thing they like to call the hot foot, in which a player sticks a pack of matches to someone else's shoe and then lights it on fire. And the game is, and it's very loving. You'll often hear on YouTube, there are clips of old, kindly sounding baseball announcers in their just the sweetest little old voice. A hot foot has been scheduled, because the camera will pan over to the dugout, and there's a guy standing on the railing whose foot's on fire. And he's looking around because he can smell it. He's like, yeah, no, there's definitely something on fire. Anybody else getting this? And no one's giving him eye contact because they all know he's the one who's on fire. And then you watch this professional who's paid millions of dollars to play this game stomp frantically on his own foot to put the fire out. Yeah. My dad told me those stories as a kid. Like, your coach in Little League is telling you to light other players on fire. Now, you're not allowed to do it all the time. If you're losing the game or losing a series, not cool. Dugout shenanigans, not cool. But if you're doing well in the season and you're winning the game, you know, beautiful summer afternoon, maybe there's some things you want to do that involve symbolically lighting your teammates on fire. And that, when I was like, that's a sanctioned part of the game. It's not in the rule book, but it's clearly a part of this thing. That's like all the gods are involved here. Because in what other sport is like, we're winning, isn't everything great? I'm going to light you on fire. Like, that's not a thing unless the gods are directly fucking with human beings. The basic rules are that points in the game are called runs, and you need to have more of them than the other team at the end to win. One team is batting while the other is pitching and fielding. So batting is offense, fielding is defense. The defending team has to get 3 people out. That's what changes it to the other person being the defender, right? And baseball is divided into 9 innings. So an inning is top and bottom. So there are 2 halves to it because each team gets a chance to bat in an inning. If you hear about something that happens in the bottom of the first, okay, great, early game, whatever. But if you hear about something exciting happening in the bottom of the 9th, that's, oh my gosh, game's almost over. That must have been so exciting for the 7 people who were not too drunk to stay at the ballpark. It's one of the reasons I like you can tell stories about a baseball game, and when you say it happened in the bottom of the 4th, like that has an emotional context to it.
Totally.
So if you, it's like theater. So if you hear like the fact that you know that Hamlet thinks he saw his father's ghost on the parapet sort of influences your understanding of family stories and ghost stories and, you know, all those things afterwards, right? So in theater, if we know that the plot point that happens at the end of the first act is the thing that makes the second act necessary, we can't look at a ball game exactly like that, obviously, because it's an improv show for the most part. Unless you're cheating, Houston Astros, hey, what's up? Then it's not improv. See, when it's not improv, it's cheating. That's baseball. Yeah, so there are things you can know about the game based on the fact that that's the time it happened. Like, you can imagine what the feeling was. But like I said, outs are scored in a lot of different ways, but the most common ones are a pitcher making a batter swing 3 times without getting a hit, a fielder catching a ball that has just been hit, or a fielder catching a ball that has touched the ground and then getting it to the base where the runner is supposed to be going before the runner gets there. And like I said earlier, a batter's job is to get on base by beating the ball there. So they hit a long fly ball. If somebody catches it, it doesn't matter if they were on the base first, they're still out. But if they don't catch it, boy, they better be on first base before the ball gets there.
Right.
So since the batter's job is to get on base, and since a base runner's job is to get to home plate, there's an opportunity in there to take more bases on your turn than you're technically entitled to. There's no such thing as like a hit, you can only 1 run base. You're allowed to run as long as you think you can before you get caught. Mm-hmm. So there's no artificial limit put on how far you can run. But there is a thing where if the base in front of you isn't occupied, during normal play, you're allowed to try and take that base if you can make it 90 feet fast enough. Like, you know, I think I'm going to take second base. I think I want to be standing there. I don't want to be standing here. I'm going to steal second. And most steals can happen in a lot of different ways, but mostly they happen when the pitcher is about to throw his pitch. Because most pitchers are right-handed, and that means their back is to first base.
Oh, I think that's interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So it's harder for them to tell what's going on. Now, infielders, everyone's on the lookout. It's not a little league game, right? Everyone's like flagging, like maybe he's going to go. And also these guys are reviewing the stats of the people they're about to play against. So they know that this guy is really terrible at hitting high fastballs, but he's awesome at low breaking balls or whatever. And they know who's likely to steal and how often they steal against right-handed pitchers and how often they steal against left-handed and all of that stuff. So these guys are like looking at the game through the lens of stats while they're playing it. But you're allowed to try and take more than you're technically entitled to, which I think makes it a pretty American game.
I was going to say that's so American.
You know. You're not supposed to go there now, but if you can do it, we're not going to tell you no. Hey, man, that's pretty exciting ball you're playing. Oh, yeah, no, you're totally cheating, but we're going to make it legal because it's fun to watch. I've said that baseball's on a human scale. Bodies tend to get tired at roughly the same time. Bodies at the same level of fitness get tired in the same amount of time. But I've also said that I know that the gods are involved because of teammates, when they're in a good mood, trying to light each other on fire. So having said it's on a human scale and also that the gods are involved, I would hope at this point you would have some questions for me because those two things don't necessarily fit together. So the way we're going to talk about that is that I get to tell you about Rickey Henderson. And my heart is so full because I don't know if I'll have a child, but I imagine if I had one, the awesome feeling I got getting to tell them about the cool shit in the world. Like, I'm the one who told you about Star Wars. You learned about that from me. That's how I feel right now. Like, I get to tell you who Rickey Henderson is. And you don't know. You don't know.
I have no idea.
And I'm going to be the one who's responsible for forming your earliest memories of Rickey Henderson. It's an awesome responsibility.
This is lovely.
So there's a website or podcast, small media conglomerate, something called SB Nation, which was started by a guy who likes the A's. That's the Oakland A's. The Oakland Athletics, Claire. They're a baseball team. And he had a blog talking about that, and then it formed into a thing called SB Nation. And I don't know that SB stands for sports ball, but I really want it to. And so, by the power vested in me as co-writer of this podcast, I'm going to say that SB Nation stands for Sports Ball Nation. And they have a show called Dorktown that did a really beautiful episode on Rickey Henderson, and I'm about to crib from it very heavily. To understand what a glorious anomaly Rickey Henderson was, you have to know that during his time in the history of baseball, which is the 80s and 90s, roughly, there weren't that many records left that could be shattered. The game has been played for so long by so many different people that the kind of like superhuman feats you expect to see to move those records, into the stratosphere, that had all pretty much been done by the time he started playing. The last major swell in records was late 40s, early 50s, and records had stayed within about 10% of that since then. So since roughly the Depression era, when we talk about breaking baseball records, we're talking about beating them by one. Like, someone has a record for the most number of home runs. We're not looking for someone to suddenly have double that many home runs, right? Because getting that many home runs over the course of your career is an incredibly difficult thing. Mm-hmm. And part of that picture is that most professional ball players only play for about 6 years. Mm. Can you imagine?
Wow.
And this is in a sport that's not, in a lot of ways, is not as demanding as others.
Right.
Soccer players play longer than that. Basketball players play longer. Football players play longer. And I don't have any understanding of why it's true, except that the gods are involved in this game and they get bored easy. So even the ones who are very, very good don't actually end up having that much time to try and set or meet one of these records. So, for example, of the 1,688 players whose rookie season was in 1980, and I think Rickey Henderson's first game was in 79, but maybe 1980 was considered his rookie season. Of the 1,688 players whose rookie season was in 1980, only 16 of them went on to play 20 or more seasons. That's like, I can't do math very well, but that looks to me like 1%.
Yeah, I think it's 1%.
Like 1% of them play 20 or more. And if one of those 16 players who was lucky enough to play for 20 years wanted to beat the all-time home run record, they would have to be in the top 4% of home run hitters every year for 20 years to even be in range of the record.
Wow.
Right? And so when you say it like that, it's like, oh shit, that's never going to happen. And that ends up mostly being true. It's never going to happen. It's very rare that a person is even in position to break it, much less absolutely destroy it. So at this point in baseball's history, most of the records are like that. It shouldn't be possible to shatter them. But Rickey Henderson shattered one of the, blew it out of the water. Rickey Henderson stole more bases than anyone ever. He stole more bases than teams. He stole more bases than divisions at some points in his career. So, more wills from my beloved 63 Dodgers, which I've talked to you about before. He played shortstop. He did some good work trying to move the steal record in the 50s and 60s. Lou Brock tried to do it in the 70s, I think. He made a little progress too. So those guys made a tiny dent. And then Ricky came along and moved it by 60% in like 12 years. The numbers alone. He's one of only 32 people to have gotten 3,000 career hits. And he also holds the record for the most unintentional walks. Okay, so he's got a good bat. He's a good hitter, and he can get walked. So you know he's going to get on base, which is what we like. We like people who get on base, right? Because they score runs. But he was a magical human being. There was a game in 1982 where he made it to first at his first at bat on an error. Somebody in the infield flubbed the throw or something. He should have been thrown out, but he wasn't. So it's called an error, not a single. So Ricky's on first on an error. He then stole second, and then stole third in the same go-round. Immediately stole second, immediately stole third, and then went home and scored. And then at another at-bat in the same game, he was hit by a ball, so he went to first. He legged it out to third when someone else hit a single that should have stopped him at second, so he's taken 2 bases instead of the 1, right? And then he stole home. So in the course of like 3 or 4 innings, he had turned an error and being hit by a pitch into 7 bases and 2 runs. Like, that's the kind of fucking mad genius Ricky Henderson was.
He's wily.
He's just making it happen. He's like, yeah, there's not much going on here. You know, I think I'm going to go to second. And then he's looking around. And he's like, yeah, I'm just going to go to third. And he's like, oh, I'm still pitching. I think I'm going to steal home. Like, and you know, there's people are like, oh, I get so nervous. Like you have to surprise people. You can't steal if they know you're going to do it. Part of it is like the shock of it or whatever. He would literally stand there and be like, you know, I'm going to steal because when I'm presented the opportunity to steal a base, I try it 75% of the time. So I'm going to try and steal, and your job is to try and stop me, moron. Good luck. And they couldn't do it. Oh God, he was so good. Before he was 25 years old, he had already had 3 seasons in which he drew 100 walks, which means he got either hit or a legitimate walk 100 times, and stole 100 bases. So those are called 100 seasons. Okay? He had 3 of them before he was 25 years old. Guess how many other people have? None.
Wow.
In the history of baseball, no one has even done that once. And he did it 3 years before he was 25 years old. He's so amazing. If you look at the record for players that got a hit to go to first base and then stole bases after on the same go-around, he's at the very, very top. Like, he's the absolute leader. He did that 6,651 times in his career, okay? Only Ty Cobb, whose name you know, even though you don't know why, Pete Rose, probably the same, yes. And maybe Barry Bonds, also the same. Only those 3 are even in his ballpark. Everyone else did it at least 1,000 fewer times than him. Right? He's just an alien. He's like, you know what? Oh man, I love the idea that they're like building Ricky in heaven, and they're like, we're gonna send this guy down. What's he gonna do? And he's like, I think he'd be a good ball player. We're like, okay, sure, we'll make him a ball player. It's a good choice. It's a good option. In 1982 alone, that same season where he turned, an error and being hit by a pitch into 2 runs, 19 times in that season, he hit to first, stole second, then stole third immediately after. He's just like, a normal hit is 1 base, but I think I'm going to take 3. I think I'm going to take 3. And you guys can't fucking stop me. So I'm just going to keep going. So in that season, by the end of that 1982 season, he had stolen more bases than the Orioles, Red Sox, and Twins combined.
Wow.
He's just so good at his job. Okay. He also batted left-handed and threw right-handed, which I haven't really worked in to how that matters, but I feel like it's important. He's one of only a few people who've done that as a professional baseball player, and I don't know why it fits in, but I'm pretty sure it does. So he stole 1,406 bases in his career, which is just the recordist record of records. He has the most runs, 2,295, and he also has records for unintentional walks and leadoff home runs. Leadoff is the first player to bat in their inning. Okay. And he holds the record for just going up there and hitting a home run and Free run. This thing where he's so far outpaced all of the excellent, very talented, dedicated, hardworking professional baseball players who had played before and with him, right? He's just like, he's on a different planet. He's playing a different game at this point. It's like, oh, we thought we understood what baseball was. But then look at this guy. That's baseball. What are we doing? We have to figure out, oh my gosh, can we do that? Oh no, we can't do that. No one can do that but Ricky. Oh, okay. So we don't have to completely overturn the game and come up with new rules, which is one of the favorite things for me that happens when somebody's just really too good at a sport or like plays the loopholes, you know? He's not playing loopholes. He's just like, I'm Ricky Henderson. I'm going to steal your bases now. God, he's so good.
So was he just ballsier or had more physical prowess? I mean,
he was fast. He was fast and I think fearless. And there are a few really funny stories, and one of them is that before every single game of his career, and this has been confirmed by a ton of people who saw him do it, before every single game of his career, he would stand naked in front of a full-length mirror, posing, saying, "Ricky is the best. Ricky is the best." Yeah.
Well, affirmation.
That's probably. Yeah, he was hip to validation. He was like, I'm going to take a superhero pose. He's constantly talking to himself, saying, first of all, I love him because he constantly talked to himself. He would say, Ricky and Ricky and Ricky, you know, like that, which it's the most endearing thing because please don't let me be the only person who does that. But he would talk to himself, and there was this story of Ricky striking out, and then going back to the dugout, and the person from his own team who was coming up to hit after him heard him say, "It's okay, Ricky, you're still the best." Isn't that lovely? I just love it so much. There's a baseball player called John Olrude, who was hurt as a child. He had an aneurysm, and so he was a professional ball player, but he wore a batting helmet at all times when he was in the field, because if you get hit by a ball and your head explodes, maybe you're going to take some extra precautions, right? So nobody does that. He wore a batting helmet all the time. And he had been traded to a new team or something, and he was taking some hitting practice, and Ricky comes up and he goes, "Hey man, you wear that hat all the time?" And he's like, "Yeah, I was hurt as a child, and it just, keeps me safer on the field." And Ricky said, "Oh, I used to play ball with a guy who did that." And John says, "That was me, Ricky." There was another time a team he was playing for was like $1 million in the black for no reason. They're like, "Why do we have $1 million extra? It's absolutely crazy." And they send the accounting nerds to figure out what happened. And you're like, "Hey, Ricky, you know that $1 million bonus check we sent you, buddy? Was there a problem with it?" He's like, "Oh, no, I framed it." He framed it and put it on the wall. And he's just like, "Oh, it's $1 million. It's fine." The last thing that I need to tell you about Ricky Henderson is that he was born on Christmas, which is also how you know the gods are involved. All right, so I told you the story of Ricky Henderson so I could tell you this. I'm going to tell you about the difference between power hitting and small ball. It's two different ways of playing the game. They both work in certain circumstances. Depending on how much money a team has, that might determine which course they take, which kind of ball they want to play, depending on their current team configuration, depending on what the manager wants, depending on a lot of factors. But in general, it's these two styles of play. Small ball style is about working the edges. Always grinding, finding little opportunities and turning them to big opportunities. It's the kind of ball that utilizes stealing bases. Ricky Henderson is very good at it. Power hitting is just what it sounds like. You stand in the batter's box, you're a big dude, you hit the ball out of the park. That's it. They both have their place. In general, it's easier to win, meaning it requires a more limited skill set using batting power than it does to play small ball. Because small ball is about everyone being at the top of their game, looking for those opportunities all the time.
Right.
It's a hungry way of playing.
Mm-hmm. Power
hitting, you're good at hitting, you can read a pitcher. That's kind of the only thing you have to worry about. Fielding doesn't even come into it. Billy Bean, I owe Billy Bean a debt of thanks because I don't know any of his stuff. Except that he knows it. Everyone go watch Moneyball right now. It's amazing. So I really like watching a towering shot headed over the center field fence, particularly when it's my team and they're doing it to win the game. That's very exciting. No problem. But in general, small ball is more fun to watch because all of the drama of small ball happens out in the open. Like you can see it. It's externalized on the bodies of the people playing the game. Power hitting style happens mostly at home plate, in the heads and in the hands of the pitcher, catcher, and batter. Mm-hmm. And so it's intense and quiet, and it all happens sort of right there in a tiny area, where a small ball is like diving for a catch and then sliding as you throw it. And I just like watching it a whole lot better. So the gods of the air are power hitters. The gods of the earth are the ones who leg out triples. And every game is a fight between them. It's not a pantheon in the Greek model. The gods who play baseball are there to play the game for themselves. They're not there to, like, give the humans glory. They want to play baseball. They're like, oh my god, this is the best game. You guys have invented this super cool game. We're going to come and play it. And so every game I'm watching is two games at once. It's the game between the two teams who are playing that day, and it is also a game between the gods of the air and the gods of the earth. Anytime the ball is in the air, during throws between fielders, after it's been hit, but before it's caught, the gods of the air are in control of the ball. And they want the ball to stay in the air. That's their whole thing. There's nothing worse for them than the ball being caught. The gods of the air are the ones who inch home runs over the fence just outside the reach of the center fielder, or who lend that awesome power to the right arm of an outfielder as he throws out a guy who's trying to sneak it to third. Anytime the ball is on the ground or in someone's hand, the gods of the earth are in control of it. The gods of the earth also control base runners, lending them strength and speed, clear vision, and clear lungs. The gods of the earth reward patience, attention, diligence, humor, and self and situational awareness. The gods of the air reward power and cinematic timing. The gods of the earth know what's going on, and the gods of the air know how it looks. The gods of the earth care about your intention and your spiritual commitment, and the gods of the air care about the quiet whistle of air around a ball that heads into the stratosphere, everyone's eyes on it. If a base runner trips as he runs, announcers usually call out sniper as a joke, but what really happened is that the gods of the earth became displeased with the runner and broke his connection to their power, causing him to stumble. When I see a long shot hit into deep left center, and it's a toss-up whether the center fielder is going to make it to the ball in time to catch it or not, but he gets there in time, just barely, but the ball misses his glove, I know that what I've seen is not a man missing a ball he was trying to catch, but a man caught up in a battle between gods. And I've come to a weird spiritual understanding of this game through its statistics. When there's no explanation for why a man who has caught many hundreds of fly balls in a particular area of the field in his professional career suddenly misses one for no reason, what can it possibly be except divine interference? Baseball is for people who either see through the matrix or don't believe there is one. As I'm both of those kinds of people. I see through it, which is why I think it's not real. That is a lot of what I love about baseball.
That was beautiful. That was so beautiful.
I've never written it as a manifesto before.
Right.
It was all just kind of feelings I had. I was like, what is that? Oh, yeah, that. Yeah.
Well, now I want to watch a fucking game.
The spiritual connection I feel to the game is partially a result of the fact that it is boring, which is why when you asked that question, I was like, that is the perfect question to ask. Because I was writing that, I was like, oh yeah, because when you're watching it, it's like, why am I here? Why is any of us here? We're standing around a field waiting for something to happen. We have the potential for something to happen here, but it might not happen. I mean, it's just, I go into this like, what is the point of existence when you watch a seven innings of a baseball game and no one gets a hit? Like, what, right. You know? It puts me in contact with what I expect as a human, like narrative expectations.
I guess I'm curious when you started to realize that there were layers to this game, or that there was a spiritual aspect to the game.
I really saw gods playing baseball for the first time when I was maybe 14 or 15. And for some reason I was in the outfield, which was not a normal location for me. Maybe we were warming up or something, but it was a beautiful early summer evening. And in West Virginia, all the ball fields are like near the swamp because that's where there was cheap land, you know. And so there are mosquitoes everywhere and there's haze coming up and the crickets are starting. And if you're really lucky, there are a few early lightning bugs maybe. And I was standing out and a breeze came across carrying a little dust from the infield. And so I got the negative ions from the water in the air and the dust from the infield. And I was like, okay, God is real. Which it's so meaningful I had to laugh. Like, because, you know, in the middle of a West Virginia kid-sized center field, I was like, yeah, God exists. But I really saw it and saw how it played out in other people's games of baseball. right? I related it to mine first, of course. Saw it related to other people's games of baseball when I moved to Colorado, because until I moved here, I didn't have access to a ballpark. And so sitting up at Coors Field on a similar, I think this was later summer evening, and you watch the sun go down in the west over the Rockies, and I was watching a team play and nothing was happening, and I forget who we were playing, but there was a hit, and I think it was along the first baseline, and the first baseman missed it. And it may have been when Todd Helton was still playing for the Rockies. So again, anyone who likes baseball, go Todd Helton. He's the best. And I think he missed it. And I was like, Todd Helton just missed a ground ball. What? Oh, right. It's because he's not the only one playing this fucking game.
Very cool. It just sounds like it really... I guess what I'm struck with is the rhythm really seems like the rhythm of life. You know, that you wait, nothing's going on, and then there are these big moments.
Yeah. When suddenly everything is going on. And it's also, I think there's definitely a part of it that it's the only piece of Americana that I actually identify with. Like, everything else is fully external to my identity as a person. I understand Thanksgiving. I understand how problematic it is and why. I understand the 4th of July. I get it, but they're not mine in the same way. I can't own them as wholeheartedly as I own baseball because they are so incredibly socially problematic. And not that baseball's not. I mean, I have a lot of the same feelings at parties as I have at baseball games, but I'm allowed to process them in private and how I want to process them at baseball games. But if I'm at a party, I'm like, I have to be able to leave because it's going to get boring. And when it gets boring, I'm out. But at a baseball game, I'm like, it's going to get boring. And that's something you just have to accept if you're going to get the fun parts. And so it's really helped me, like, yeah, you're not gonna like every second of it, but you might get to see something cool. And that's kind of how I feel about life. You're not gonna like every second of it, but you might get to see something cool. Yeah. And it feels like that's a much healthier stance toward existence. It's a healthier way of engaging. It's not always as much fun, but it's healthier.
That's really cool. It sounds like it makes you a patient person.
Yeah, it has that effect on me. They say that being bored is the way we create because you gotta just turn off your script. And baseball lets you do that too, because there's no script for a game.
Well, Teresa, thank you for telling me about baseball.
You're welcome. Please let me talk to you about it more tomorrow.
I will. I look forward to the day that we can go to a game together.
Yeah.
So look for that, guys.
Testing? Great. Thank you for listening to It Chooses You. Your hosts are Teresa Sparks and Claire Patton. Our theme song is by Bobby Dart. If you'd like to get in touch with us, drop us an email at itchoosesyoupodcast@gmail.com.